So let me ask you, what do you think the number one mistake is that people make when they're outsourcing logistics operations? I mean, outsourcing logistics has been around for a very long time, and over 85% of companies outsource some part of their logistics operations. And there's a lot of benefits for it. So that trend is certainly continuing. But there's a number of mistakes that people make, and I'll put a link either above or below this video to some more tips for logistics outsourcing. But right now, I just want to talk about the number one mistake that people make. And I've been lucky enough over the last 20 years or so to help hundreds of companies through this process, selecting 3PLs, evaluating them, transitioning into 3PL relationships, and still I see this mistake coming up. Now, it's probably not that obvious. It's data. So just think about it for a moment. If you are actually asking a number of third-party logistics companies to bid for, let's say, doing your warehousing, if you don't provide enough data, it's a little bit like going to an architect and say, hey, I'm married, I've got 3 kids, build me a house. And what are you going to come back with? They really don't know what you want, and so they're going to be factoring in things that perhaps are unnecessary. Maybe there's going to be things in there with additional costs because they're really not sure exactly what the client wants. And it's exactly the same with outsourcing, whether it be transport or warehousing or any other part of your logistics or supply chain operation. Data is essential, really accurate data. So from the client perspective, let me give you an example of how much data is required. First of all, I'd be giving a complete master file of products. So you can imagine however many hundreds or thousands that you've got, all of the product codes and descriptions, the pack sizes, do they come in 10s and 12s, all that kind of thing. The weights and dimensions are really important because if you're going to put together a warehousing solution, you need to know how big these things are. So how will they fit into the picking slots? How much storage space do you need? You need then order data. So, maybe a month's worth, 12 months worth. I've certainly worked with clients where we've had hundreds of thousands of order lines to analyze the throughput of the products. And why is that important? Because one of the biggest costs in warehousing is labor. And if you don't know how many times those products are being picked for an order, how many go on an order line. So imagine the data file. You've got order 1, 2, 3, and then you've got 3 different products, and there was 2 of these and 4 of those and 6 of those. You need that level of information to work out how many staff or what type of technology you're going to use to actually pick the products. So if you're picking at 60 picks an hour or 100 picks an hour, hopefully you can start to see how important that information is. So if you can provide that kind of level of data, the 3PL's got a really good chance of coming up with a solution and the resources and the costs that are right for their operation. You see, now what happens if they don't have that data? They start to make assumptions. The really good 3PLs will ask questions, lots of questions. But sometimes that's difficult because the client has said, every time somebody asks a question, we'll share the answer, and the 3PLs can get a bit reluctant, like maybe the others haven't asked. But the really good ones will ask because they know that they need that level of information. So if they don't have it, if maybe they're not a very experienced or mature 3PL, they're going to start guessing. And when they start to guess, what happens is they'll put in extra resources, extra assets, and that means extra cost. So the whole contract gets padded out with contingency. And that's why you've got to have really good data. The other reason to have good data is that the third-party logistics company needs to really understand the operation warts and all. So, if you've got 2% returns or 5% returns, you've got to share that as well. Because otherwise, what happens? 6 months down the track, you've implemented the contract, it's all going well, and then these returns start to happen. And if that wasn't declared early on, the 3PL company is going to be saying, hey, we didn't know about this is extra tasks, we need extra resources, and so the costs go up. So it's all about visibility of data right down into lots and lots of detail. Now, hey, the 3PLs are not totally blamed in this either. As a third-party logistics company, if you're not getting the level of data granularity that you need, you've got to be asking. Also, what can happen is that you get a lack of visibility and granularity from the 3PL side, from their from their tender document, from their response to the request for quotation, whatever you want to call it. And the biggest thing that the clients want to see is visibility of resources and costs and productivity, because they want to have confidence in the 3PL that the solution's been put together really well and it's appropriate and there's the right number of resources and there's the right assumptions around productivity. Because if they don't have the visibility of that, they start to doubt the solution and saying, is $1 million or $10 million or $20 million the right cost for this contract, because we can't see all of the resources that are going into this contract and we can't, work back through the assumptions and work out if the costs are right. So data visibility from both sides of the coin, but particularly from the clients, is probably the number one mistake that I see in logistics outsourcing. And if you don't get that right, people are guessing and things are going to get off to a pretty bad footing commercially. So that's the number one tip. If you have a look on the link, I'll make sure that there's some more tips in there. If you're seeing this on our blog, I'll put a whole bunch of tips down below all about outsourcing. So just remember to share lots and lots of data, accurate data, so that people can put solutions together in the right way, with the right resources, and at the right cost.